There are procedures or phases followed in polygraph technique. In phase 1, which is the preliminary preparations, is the initial interview with the investigator handling a case or person requesting it. The group involved in this stage are the victim or the complainant, suspects, and witnesses. This stage includes obtaining an evaluation of facts, determining areas the subject needs to be asked, and the investigator must furnish the examiner of the. There is what we call preliminary observations. This is a behavioral observations of the subject begin from the time he enters the reception room until he is escorted into the examination room and must be recorded by a secretary or receptionist. There is certain things to be observed on the subject's general conduct or behavior while in the waiting room. This will give the examiner a clue or guide in the most effective handling of the subject, particularly with regard to his possible resentment toward the test or other attitudes which should be understood and alleviated before the actual administration of the test. In addition, observations may be solicited from the investigator as to the subject's behavior from the notification of the test up to the arrival at the laboratory. Note should be made by any illogical or unreasonable objections to taking the test, such as strange physical ailments that are sometimes devised by the subject in the attempt to avoid taking the test. Phase 2, which is the pre-test interview. This is the interview of the subject. The primary purpose of the pre-test interview is to prepare or condition the subject for the test. Phase 3, the examination proper. After the pre-test interview, the examiner should proceed to the placement or attachment of polygraph sensors. The first to be attached is the pneumograph, followed by the cardiospimograph and the galvanograph sensors. Review all the questions with the subject before the actual examination is made. The examiner should discourage any comments or statement by the subject. Test instrument must give to the subject upon completion of the necessary preliminary preparation. The instrument is attached to the subject. Phase 4, the post-test interview, which includes all consideration that bears on the examination. This is done just after the instrument is turned off. If the polygraph test result indicates deception, the examiner will then proceed to conduct short interrogation. The purpose of this is to obtain confession. However, if the polygraph indicates that the subject is innocent, the examiner will just release the subject cordially and thanks him or her for his or her cooperation.
There are rules to be followed in the formulation of test questions. Questions must be simple and direct. They must not involve legal terminology such as rape, murder, etc. They must be answerable by yes or no. Must be short as possible. Their meaning must be clear and unmistakable phrase in language that the subject can easily understand. They must not be in the form of accusation. Question must never contain an inference which presupposes knowledge on the part of the subject. All questions must refer to one offense only. All questions must refer to only one element of an offense. They must not contain interference, religion, races, or belief. There are types of test questions, and I will define how they constructed. The polygraph test consists of asking the subject or person through a list of prepared questions in a planned sequence comprising of not more than 12. At least 3 test charges are taken, each lasting not more than 4 minutes with a rest interval of 5 to 10 minutes between charges. There are 2 general types of questions to be constructed and may be supplemented by other types of questions. General question test is the most commonly applied. Peak of tension test is usually used as supplementary test. There are also 5 sets of tests that may be applied during the polygraph examination process. Test 1 is the general question test. The purpose is to get the standard tracing of the subject and to establish a true telling pattern for the initial part of the record. Test 2 is the number test or psychological test. The purpose is to check the possible deliberate distortion between when the chosen number is asked and to obtain a chart wherein that subject is not under stress. Test 3 is the spot responder. The purpose is to determine the responsiveness of the subject to the crucial question on spot responses. Test 4 is the mixed question. The purpose is to compare the degree of reaction between control and relevant question. Test 4 is the silent answer test. It is a confirmatory test. The GQT consists of series of relevant and irrelevant questions asked in a planned order. Questions are so arranged as to make a comparison of responses to relevant questions with a subject's norm made during the answering of irrelevant questions. The relevant questions functionally. Relevant questions are questions directly related to the offense under investigation. In pre-employment and periodic screening, the area of interest may be a series of relevant questions such as, have you ever been fired from a job? Or have you stolen more than 50 pesos in 1 year from any of your employers? Relevant questions are further classified according to its stimulation effect when applied, namely, strong relevant or primary relevant question, which has the intense relationship to the crime or problem being considered. This is intended to produce strong emotional responses in guilty subjects. For example is, did you steal Lisa's cell phone? While the secondary or weak relevant are questions that concern with elements of the crime and deals mostly on guilty knowledge and partial involvement. For example is, on December 25, 2022, between 11 to 1 a.m., did you go to the house of Mr. Rayonda? Further, the weak relevance classified into the following: sacrifice relevant or DY80 questions, or do you intend to answer truthfully? It is designed to absorb the response generally generated by the introduction of the first relevant questions in the series. Reaction to this question gives the examiner a clue as to the subject's attitude of willingness or voluntariness to submit to the test. For example, regarding the stolen cell phone, do you intend truthfully to answer each question about that? Next is the knowledge questions. This type of question is propounded to the subject to detect information about a crime that only a guilty subject would have. Such information might include details about the site of the crime or the means of committing it, such as the type of weapon used. It is hypothesis that guilty subjects will exhibit a different physiological response to the correct or relevant detail that to the incorrect details, but the innocent subjects will respond the same to all the items. For example is, do you know for sure who stole the cell phones of Lisa? At this type of instance, the phrase for sure is included to eliminate further suspicion, just in case the subject knew the offender and the location of the evidence but is only hesitant to answer yes. Evidence connecting question. This has to do with inviting subject's attention on the probability of incriminating proof that would intend to establish his guilt by linking him and his predicaments to the fingerprints, footprints, tool marks, etc. collected at the crime scene. For example, is the fingerprint get in the class is yours. The control questions are used for purposes of comparison. Essentially, truthful subjects are believed by polygraph examiners to be more concerned and thus more physiologically aroused. About control, that relevant question, the response to both control and relevant questions are compared. Control questions have two kinds. Primary control questions recalls the offense done from the time of childhood up to 3 to 5 years before the occurrence, the present offense being investigated. For example, before reaching the age of 30, have you killed someone? Secondary control question is more specific in nature. It is based upon another sort of wrongdoing, which will enhance the subject's opportunity for responsiveness. Its scope includes up the present period of examination. Have you ever killed someone from this locality? The formulation of both types of control question necessitates reasonable certainty that the subject's answer is a lie. It is theorized that auto-guilty subjects will also be concerned about control questions. They will be more concerned about and thus exhibit more physiological reactions to relevant questions. The irrelevant or neutral questions. This type of question which have no importance to the case under investigation. There are questions which are believed to have no or very little emotional impact on a subject. Thus, such question can be used as an indicator of a particular subject's normal baseline level of arousal. This must precede the relevant ones. For example, what is the date today? Did you eat today? What is the color of your dress? There is other questions that may be asked in polygraph techniques. One is the check question, which is the last question asked in the late test. It is direct questions that relates to the fact that the subject has told the truth to all the questions asked in the late test. Two is the fishing expedition test question used to vigorous or loiters for routine interrogation. No idea about what offense has been committed. For example is, have you ever been arrested before? Are you wanted anywhere now by the police? I hope you learned. And now you can make a general question test.